live outside of a rural town in central Illinois called Metamora. It's about 15 miles south of Peoria and 3 hours south of Chicago. Metamora is surrounded by farmlands where they grow soybeans or seed corn. Most of the people in this area no longer farm, but work in some sort of light industry or white-collar job. Still, their families have lived here a very long time. Metamora is not without controversy. Some years ago, there was a question of whether or not to widen Route 116, the state highway, right through the center of town. More recently, the park board has wanted to develop a wilderness area, Black Partridge Park, into a golf, hotel, and convention center complex. So there are a lot of signs up for and against that. Metamora is also the home of the Metamora Redbirds, whose football team has just recently gone to the state championship. My son goes to Metamora grade school. He's in the 2nd grade. I'm one of the picture person volunteers, which means monthly I go into his and another class and present the work of an artist and have the children do something in that context. I also hold a weekly discussion group with some senior citizen men at the Riverview residence, where my father lives. Although the women at Riverview have no problem socializing, for some reason the men do, at least with other men. So it was my initial objective to provide an opportunity for my father, who's a new resident, to meet other men. We had been meeting 2 or 3 times, discussing current events, or the golden years, which they told me weren't so golden, when I asked them to solve the world's problems. We used Pablo Freire's popular education techniques that he first used in the 1960s for his work in the slums of Rio de Janeiro. His techniques are to empower groups and individuals to learn and solve problems. Popular education has 3 basic steps. 1, to see the situation. 2, to judge or analyze it, and then 3, to act. I facilitated the process. The men listed what they thought were the problems of the world. Then they looked at the immediate and root causes. Finally, they tried to write a number of sentences that would tell the children how they must act to alleviate these problems. They realized right off that they couldn't just tell the children, well, why would the kids listen now if they hadn't before? So they went round, and after about 15 minutes, they were finally looking for a sentence that could convey 3 key points: money, respect, and communication. And then Ted, 95 years old, said that the root to all of those was respect. I wrote that single word large on the pad, and we all looked at it, and you could just feel the magic of the moment. It was clear that nothing else needed to be said. So I went to Metamora grade school. I met first with Mrs. Grebner's 3rd grade class, and then the next day with Mrs. Weber's 2nd grade class. Interestingly, the thought process, the way the kids responded, was almost identical. I introduced the subject by saying that I had a group of friends who were all about the age of their grandfather, or even great-grandfather. And we talked a little bit about what those lives would have been like, riding a horse to school, using an outhouse, having no electricity, so forth. And I told the kids that I asked those men to solve the world's problems. I asked the kids what the problems of the world were. The 3rd graders were pretty global in their thinking: drugs, violence, stealing. The 2nd graders were a bit more narrowly focused: enemies on the playground, blisters on your feet, things like that. I told them that the men had found one word to solve the world's problems: respect. What did that mean? They had a general idea, and I helped fill in with a dictionary definition: to hold in high regard, to show consideration for, to relate to. Then I asked them to make sentences to show me they really understood. They were to use the subject I, the verb respect, and then they would complete the sentence with an object. So they really took off. I respect my pets. I respect my sister. I respect my parents, my cousins, other people, my things. After everyone had a turn, I asked them, well, what about bad guys? Do you have to respect your enemies? Immediately everyone said, no. And then in both classes the same thing happened. One person said yes, and slowly the whole class went from being very disrespectful to their enemies to being respectful. We talked about not having to hug the enemy, but showing them respect. The kids then painted signs showing the sentences they had written. They painted about 80 signs in all. The day after Thanksgiving weekend, I came early in the morning to the grade school and put them up in the front yard. There was a lot of interest in them. An 8th grader asked me what they were for, and I asked her what she was thinking when she looked at them. She told me she was thinking about the people who she respected. And that was plenty for me. I felt we'd really accomplished a whole lot just from getting that one remark. I asked a second grader who I knew what he thought of them, and he said that when his father dropped him off at school that day, his father was sort of scared. He thought there was some kind of trouble going on with signs of protest, and he was surprised to see what they were really about. Later that week, I took some of the actual signs and some photos of the kids with the signs back to the men at Riverview. They were pretty impressed with what had gone on, and I think they were pleased that their thinking could have had such a far-reaching effect. And then I went back to the students to ask them what they thought and felt when they saw their signs up at the school. Embarrassment was one of the answers. They seemed to feel that they, not just their words or their painted signs, but that they, as individuals, were up there on the front lawn. But there was also a certain sense of pride from having been able to say something and having people look and read and perhaps even learn from what they were saying as second and third graders. I found it interesting that Frere's popular education techniques apply to our situation in Metamora, Illinois. I also found it interesting that the discussions of one group, the senior men, could evolve into a set of signs painted by a second group, the students, that would impact a third group of people, the viewers of the signs, who were completely removed from the first group. That patterning suggests to me that there are remarkable similarities between human communities, regardless of age or nationality. And I think back to the Latin root of the word respect, respectus, respectus, to look at, to look back on. I'm struck by the reflective note, to look back on, as if to suggest that we humans are all so much alike, and treating another person well is truly just how we would like to be treated ourselves.